Nothing contained in this videocast is intended to encourage the use of illegal substances. This videocast represents only the opinions of the host and their guests and should not be taken as medical or legal advice. In no way does listening, reading, corresponding, or interacting on social media with our content establish a doctor-patient or legal relationship. The content here is intended to share thoughts and opinions to foster constructive discussion. Please consult your healthcare professional for any medical questions concerning cannabis. The views expressed by hosts and guests on this videocast are not necessarily the views of Global Cannabis Times or any other company with which the hosts and guests are associated.
Welcome to another episode of Going Global, a Global Cannabis Times videocast that seeks to act as the eyes and ears on the ground of emerging international cannabis industries. Today, we are honored to be joined by Tikun Olam Cannbit CEO, Mr. Avinoam Sapir, to discuss Israel's leadership in medical cannabis research and innovation. A brief introduction about myself. My name is Ivy Bader. I work currently as a licensing and compliance manager for Global Go's licensing team, where I draw on my cannabis operational experience and legal background to help clients from all over the world obtain licensure and remain compliant in an extremely complex regulatory landscape. I'm going to briefly hand it off to my co-host, Mr. Yoram Eshel, founder and CEO of Cannabis, to introduce himself before we formally introduce our special guest.
Thank you very much, Ivy. My name is Yoram Eshel. Up until about 4 years ago, I was the head of logistics of Teva Pharmaceuticals, globally responsible for all Teva Pharmaceuticals logistic activities around the world, working very closely with Avinoam. I retired from Teva about 4 years ago, established Cannabis, which is a leading company specializing in global cannabis supply chain and logistics services. Today, we are operating about 75-80% of all the Israeli import and export here in Israel, but we're also acting globally to and from many countries in North America, in Africa, many countries in Europe, some countries in the Far East, and here we are. So thank you very much, Ivy, for the opportunity, and back to you.
Fantastic. Thank you for joining us today. I am thrilled to bring today's discussion to our audience. We will interview Mr. Sapir, who has a long list of accolades, from a leading cannabis business executive to author. He has decades of experience in the global pharmaceutical field, in which he has held a number of positions in management, marketing, sales, and mergers and acquisitions. Mr. Sapir was previously the CEO of Eshel, a large-scale Israeli pharmaceutical distribution company, CEO of Teva Israel, founder and chairman of the Sonara Ventures Investment Fund, JV, and manager of Africa and the Middle East region for Global Teva, where he oversaw $1.2 billion in sales. As mentioned, Mr. Sapir is the current CEO of Tikun Olam Cannbit. Tikun Olam, the pioneer of medical cannabis in Israel, was founded in 2006 and acquired by Cannbit Pharmaceuticals in 2019. The company operates throughout the medical cannabis value chain, including genetic, research and development, 2 cultivation farms, a pharmaceutical-grade manufacturing facility, storage and distribution services, and a treatment and guidance clinic. Tikun Olam Cannbit has conducted 35 clinical and preclinical studies in collaboration with leading doctors, hospitals, and universities in Israel. The company has established some exciting collaborations with the backbone of the global pharmaceutical among them, Teva and Wavelength. It is an absolute honor and privilege to interview him. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Avinoam Sapir to today's discussion on cannabis in Israel.
Thank you for hosting us, and thank you actually for the opportunity to be part of this discussion. I'm thrilled and excited as well.
Wonderful to have you here. Thank you so much. So, Avinoam, could you tell our viewers a little bit more about yourself? I understand your background is in the pharmaceutical space. How did you find yourself in the role of CEO for Tikun Olam Cannbit?
So actually, I think that the cannabis journey started while I was the CEO of Teva in Israel. I saw what's happening globally with the cannabis. I'm speaking about 2013 and 14. While on that time, Teva was the leader or part of the leadership in the 2 therapeutics area globally. One of them is the pain, and the other one is the movement disorder. For these 2 therapeutics area, Teva has the opportunity to offer the innovative drugs, the generic drugs, and in some of the countries, the OTC drugs as well. I thought that it's going to be a great idea to join to this offer while we already has an existing capabilities in the markets globally the marketing capabilities, the relation with the key opinion leaders, with the Ministry of Health in some of these countries. So I thought it's going to be a great idea to bring in not only the regular chemical pharmaceuticals, but also bringing the cannabis as part of the offering. So while you are meeting the physician, speaking about the offering of the innovative drugs and generic drugs, you can bring in some of the activities or some of the strengths that cannabis can bring. It cannot cure in this therapeutics area, but it for sure can relieve. And I thought it's going to be an idea. So it's actually presented to the board several times. And in the end of the day, I got the opportunity to start searching and collaborating for the Israeli market. But as you may know, Israel is in the size of a city in the US, and there are people who say that they are in the size of a neighborhood in Cairo or in Moscow. So although that it was a great idea, the Israeli market is limited, and I saw what's happening globally and what's happening in the other innovative companies in Israel. So I thought it's going to be a great idea to join. If you can beat them, join them. So I decided to join them and to be part. And while being part, so I had the opportunity to be part of several of cannabis companies, but none of them had the heritage and the history that Tikun Olam had, which is, as you said, the 35 clinical trials, the 20 different publications. So after having a due diligence with the several of the companies, I decided that once Cannbit acquired Tikun Olam, it's going to be a great opportunity and challenge to be part of this journey. So I joined to lead the integration of these companies and actually lead them to the next stage in the area of the cannabis industry globally.
Wonderful, wonderful. So that's a great segue to our next question, which is all about the research coming out of Israel. So I think our viewers are familiar with Israel and know the quality of cannabis coming from the country, but not as many understand to what degree Israel has been a global leader in cannabis research and since the 1960s. What were the key milestones in cannabinoid science that came from Israel that is universally accepted about cannabis today?
So first of all, the history, as you mentioned, started in the 60s by Professor Meshulam, started by that he actually is the one that found the CBD, actually described the endocannabinoid system, and is the one that isolated the THC as a compound by itself. And this kind of knowledge and notion that started in the 60s in Israel gave the opportunity to have a different research activity around that part in the Israeli space. We are actually saw a different activity that started in Israel. Because of this research, part of them actually, it was the treatment of a soldier with a PTSD of this kind of components, and we saw the effect of it. So I think that the heritage, or actually the milestone that Israel had in the last 60 years, actually is the one that gave the opportunity to the regulator to try some of this activity and to conduct the clinical trial that I spoke previously. And I think that we have a different understanding about what this, I wouldn't say the flower, because speaking about the flower itself or the cannabis itself, it's ridiculous. Each one of these flowers has a different components that can and may affect differently. But about the component themselves and the ability to bring the relief in some of the therapeutics area that are relevant for that.
Avinoam, given the Israeli history of cannabis research, and given your own experience with the therapeutic areas and pharmaceutical research, and given the fact that you are one of those CEOs that really involved in the scientific side of it, and not just the business side of it, what do you think are the advantages that Israel may gain of being, the leader or to dominate the cannabis global markets? How can that contribute to the Israeli business side of the cannabis industry?
So first of all, I would say that the idea that we understand a bit the flower and it's important to emphasize that we understand a bit the flower. So we know that the flower has, 400, 500 different active ingredients, and we can recognize only dozens of them. Modestly saying, it's an opportunity to learn more and to understand the different, not only what are the different active ingredients, but also what should be the right composition of these active ingredients in order to create the effect as a drug or as a relief for some of the indication that we spoke about. Previously, we spoke about Professor Meshulam. Professor Meshulam, who used to be our head of the scientific advisory board, actually was involved in some of the different clinical trials that has been conducted related to PTSD, related to ASD, related to chronic colitis. So during these years, the almost the 20 years or the 16 years that we are exist, the ability to actually to isolate some of the components or to actually to have a deeper research about some of the components or the composition of these components help us to have a better understanding about the situation that we are in or the opportunity that it is. Regarding your question, Yoram, about the advantage that the Israeli can offer, I don't think that the Israeli can offer the advantage related to the cultivation part. I think that realistically saying, it is going to be all to cultivate some of the strains, I don't know, in Africa, on some of the other markets, which the cost of living or the cost of the people, it's of the workforce, it's cheaper than Israel. Having said that, Israel is, you may know, it is a country, a startup nation. And we got many startups which related to administration form, to inhalers, and some other stuff. Ivy, when you presented me, you spoke about me being the chairman of a venture capital invested in a medical device, the name of Sanara. So even then, when I was a few years before part of the cannabis industry, there were several startups that actually focus on delivery methods. So I do believe that in Israel there is a advantage, speaks about two areas. One of them is I would say, the research or the understanding better of the flower, of the composition of the flower. And the second part is the startup related to mainly to delivery methods.
So if I take the scientific side of it, Avinoam, and I want to connect it to the business side, what do you think Israel or in general are the target markets? Where do you think that the new or the current or the new markets will be for the cannabis industry, whether to Israel or whether to others, in terms of taking the scientific side of it and bring it to the patients around the world? And we're talking medical cannabis, of course.
None of us has the crystal ball to say what's going to happen from the regulatory perspective landscape. But we do understand and we do see, all of us, that I would say each quarter or each year there are several countries that are actually starting to dive in and to have a better understanding about the capability this cannabis, this flower can bring into the regular kind of treatment, whether it is a real treatment or a relief. But I think that during the last few years, we see more and more countries that are joining into this journey. We saw in the beginning it was Israel, and then Canada and US, and then some countries in South America, and then some countries in Europe where actually Germany right now is leading, but France is under clinical trials, and UK are under discussion as well, and there are some countries as well. So I do believe that looking globally, more and more countries are going to get into it in one way or another. And and in many of them, it is starting by the clinical or the medical side of it. And during the years, it's actually getting the understanding about the risk assessed to the cannabis, and then it's become to be like a recreational part as well. This is, I would say, the notion how it's evolving globally. once the countries start speaking about the clinical part, which is, I would say, the foot in the door, then I think that Israel has a lot to offer, specifically to Tikun Olam. If you open the PubMed, you can see that the number one publisher as of today, globally, in a clinical trials, it is Israel and specifically Tikun Olam. So I think that we can offer the understanding about a bit about the products and a bit about the pharmacokinetic that related to this product and what is the way or the right way of administration. And the right way of administration, it's a critical part as well. So you might use the same product in a wrong way and the effect is going to be different. So I think that it is the methodology of the treatment as well as the product that associated with.
I would add maybe in what the list of countries that you said, Avinoam, I would add Australia.
Sure.
But now I want to ask you a tricky question. Okay.
Please. Mm-hmm.
When do you think, carefully, when do you think that the guy in downtown Los Angeles will be able to consume or to purchase Tikun Olam products?
First of all, I always prefer it's going to be...
By the way, without the crystal ball, just, you know.
First of all, I really hope that it's not going to be the guy, but it's going to be the lady.
Okay, got it.
And then I can tell you some of the strains already exist in the US under the name of Tikun, not Tikun Olam, but Tikun. So some of them are already exist, but you know better than me that as of today, nobody can bring in THC into the US. So it's only if it was cultivated in California, and there are several countries in the US that are already got the strains, and it is marketed, as I said, under the name of Tikun and not Tikun Olam. Having said that, I do believe that it's going to be changed in a way that it's a matter of time when the federal point of view is going to be changed. And as you said, I don't have the crystal ball about this one, but at least I can say that we are trying to convince about specific disease, like a fast track in the FDA. And I think that the most important part right now that we can speak about, it is the opioid crisis that it is in the US. And you know it better than me. There are numbers that speaks about between 100 to 200 people that are dying on a daily basis using opioids. And the opioid crisis, and by the way, both of us, Yoram and myself, we suffered from it as the Teva guys in the past. We conducted a clinical trial which composed 8,500 people, which is the number one from the clinical perspective, is the number one of the number of the patient that has been followed up where they were naive and then start the treatment, during the treatment, and 6 months after. And we were amazed to see that 40% of these people actually stopped using opioid absolutely. Another 13% actually the reduction of the consumption of opioids. So we do believe that once the regulator is going to be open, and it's not going to be open if it's going to be by smoking. It cannot. But if you have a different administration form, sorry, IV, in a second, if you got a different administration form, I do believe that there is a chance that it will be, the regulator itself is going to open in order to reduce the number of the people that are dying, unfortunately, on a daily basis.
That's incredible, because in the US currently, I think, at least 50% of consumption is inhalables, right? And so what's really interesting here is that you're pointing out that there's kind of this movement kind of away from inhalables and more towards ingestibles, whether, I think currently right now it kind of looks like edibles. But as we progress, we're going to see more tablets and pills and things like that.
Oils, yeah.
Actually, I think that as always, US is the leader in the market globally. I mean it. And we saw that in the US, it was like 90% of people that were used to smoke. And right now it's about 50. From the cannabis. So the reduction already happened, moving into the vape space and into the edible space and this kind of stuff. So again, as long as it consists with the right adherence and actually manufactured in the right way, and you can prove the pharmacokinetic
efficacy,
then I think that there is a different story to speak about. at least for the physician, from the physician perspective.
I'm very excited because all of this research is allowing us to kind of get what we need from the plant. You know, it's so hard. I mean, I can speak from my experience here in the US and specifically in California. It's so difficult to dose correctly. And so the fact that, you know, especially from Israel and specifically Tikun Olam Cannbit, we are learning the specific dosages that we need to treat certain things. And I mean, that's just fantastic.
So about that one, I can tell you that we choose 7 different indications that we are focusing. It's the dementia, it's the pain, it's the chronic colitis, it's anxiety. And for each one of them, we actually manufactured and create the right strains or the right composition and a different delivery method. So in that case, this is I would say, I cannot say it's the part of the future because I'm not really natural, but I do believe in my personal perspective, this is part of the future.
So what does Israel's domestic cannabis market look like currently?
So as I said previously, we are in the size of of a city in the US or neighborhood in Moscow, but in the level of consumption, we are pretty big. So as of today, we got only 110,000 people who has a license in Israel. In order to consume medical cannabis, you have to have license from a physician, a specific physician. So we got 9 million people who are evidence in Israel, and only 110,000 are the one that has the license. Still, the consumption is 45,000 kilos that are consumed on a yearly basis. So just for as a reference, I think that in Germany, it's 1/3 of it. It's 15 ton, 1/5. So we are triple.
Also about 100 patients. Yeah.
And again, 100,000. So again, we are 110, well, 10% from the Germany population, and the consumption is 3 times more. So the consumption in Israel is pretty big.
Wow, that's incredible.
But as of today, the regulator is really strict. You can actually apply for a license only in a specific physicians. There is a process for it. You have to show that you went through the regular kind of treatment, including chemicals, unfortunately, and some other stuff. So we have to prove that the process that you conducted previously and the right proof for it. So it's not so easy to get the license. And the dispensary must be in a specific pharmacies. And we got like 200 different pharmacies in that aspects in Israel. As of today in Israel, there are several companies, public companies, and the Israeli market, I would say, it is composed from import of the products and companies that are focusing on cultivation from Israel and the strains that are bring from Israel, etc., etc. So this is in a nutshell about the Israeli market.
It's about I would say Avinoam 50% import, 50% local, something like that, around that.
Yeah. In a way, again, it depends because the Israeli market is evolving. The import started only like 2 years ago or 3 years ago, something like that. 2 years ago, I think. And as of today, as Yoram said, it's about 50% that are imported. If you ask my opinion, I think that in one or another, the regulator is trying to understand what is the meaning of it, since there is a cultivation capacity in Israel of about 100 ton, and there is an importation, as Yoram said, about 20 ton as well. So what is how the futures look like? There is I would say, reduction in the prices in one way, but on the other way, I think that there is a increase or better strains and better products that are coming in. So I think that it's a great challenge. And then, as always, as every industry is going through, there are consolidation, and the strong are going to survive. Strong, by the way, is the one that have a unique value proposition. And unique value proposition can come from a specific product or from a level of research or this kind of stuff.
Okay, so it sounds like it's pretty difficult to get licensed in Israel. Just kind of following up on that, let's say for the investors in our audience, can you talk a little bit about investment opportunities in Israeli cannabis companies, and specifically yours?
Well, specifically, I would say it's even going to be even easier for me. For people who would like to invest in Israel, I would say that there are two different options. The first one is invest in the public companies, and as long as you are not having more than 5% in the company, then you can have it. If you're getting more than 5%, then you have to get the approval of the Ministry of Health and the Internal Security. But as long as you are less than 5% of the company, it's not an issue. This is one thing. By the way, we got a fund that invested in us, which is a foreigner fund, and we got the approval, and they are having more than 5% in our company. So it can be, but you have to go through a specific kind of process with the regulator to approve as a person who has more than 5% in the company. But there is another way. And the other way, it's actually investing in the R&D. So I can tell you that we got a few different examples of global companies that invested together with us in a specific kind of R&D stream. We got a company in Canada that we actually started a venture together. We got a company from the US that started a venture together for a specific kind of product or specific kind of delivery method, and we're investing together. So that can be happen. But if you would like to invest in the public company or in the mother company upstairs, then you have to or to invest less than 5% or to go to get the approval. And it's not a problem, but it can be, but you have to go through the process.
Okay, so I do have a follow-up for you because, everything that we've talked about is basically relating to medical companies. So I'm going to ask you to pull out your crystal ball again and maybe talk about, do you think that there's an opportunity for Israel to legalize adult use cannabis within the next 10, 20 years?
So I can tell you without the crystal ball, I am sure 100% that it will happen. The only question that we can argue about is when. So although that you have to have the license in order to have cannabis in Israel, you cannot really take a tour in Tel Aviv without smelling the flower all over. So wow. I think it's not a yes. By the way, we have not get into the legalization yet, but we already approved the decriminalization of it, which means that as of today, if you are in Israel and a cop, policeman got you with the cannabis, then the only thing that you can get is a fine. It's not criminal, it's nothing. It's a fine of about $150. That's what it is, not more than that. So it is not legalized yet, but in one way or another, it's on its way. And I do believe that if we're going to have a left-hand government coming and we got an election again soon, then there is an opportunity that will happen. This one thing.
Unless we will have another election later.
True. But Ivy, if you ask my personal opinion on I will bet that it will happen. I don't know when.
And we may say that the public general opinion is for a legalization or adult use in such in a certain legal structure or something like that. No, Avinoam. So Tikun Olam Cannbit has conducted 35 clinical trials and published 20 global journals. What do you think is the best research from these studies and publications? And how do you hope these studies will impact the global cannabis space? And if you can tell us some more secrets about that, about collaborations with other companies and, some juicy stories around that.
So first of all, I have to admit that this is a really tough question. All of them were my sons, right? And, there are so good, amazing results. Seriously, lately, in the last 18 months, we published several publications that I feel proud of them. And the reason I feel proud, because I do believe that we are bringing in a better usage of the money of the government, of the insurer, from the pharmaeconomic perspective, and a better relief to the people without the side effect that related to the chemical forms. And about the chemical forms, as you know, I personally sold in Israel millions of pills, tens of millions of pills, seriously, sleeping pills for the sake of the example. As far as today, I know that you can have 2 drops of Erez, one of our strands, under the tongue. It's going to give you a better effect on the sleeping perspective and without all the side effects that relate to the chemicals. So I got a real tough question for me to choose the specific research that I can speak about, but I can think about 2 of them, at least. The first one that I spoke in a nutshell previously, it's about the one that it is 8,500 people that were part of this specific study. And in this specific study, we saw a few things. First of all, we saw about the reduction of regular chemical drugs, not only the opioids that I spoke about, but also the anxiety, the sleeping, and then some other. And the most important part is the reduction overall of the polypharmacy patient, more than 3 drugs. More than that, the quality of life improved dramatically. So we saw improved reduction of the regular drugs, improve the quality of life. And actually, if you're looking as an administrator from the insurance company, it is a cost benefit dramatically to the patient. Having said that, there is another study that I'm going to show with you right now, a short movie about it, and it's about the dementia. Let's see the movie, and then we're going to speak about it. So let's see the movie.
Approximately 20% of the population over the age of 65 suffers from dementia, and as the age increases, so does the incidence of the disease. The most common and consistent symptom in patients with severe dementia is outbreaks, often combined with violence, restlessness, and a raised voice. The routine treatment options for these symptoms are limited in their effectiveness and involve serious side effects, to the point of increasing the risk of death. Tikun Olam Cannbit Pharmaceuticals conducted in collaboration with Dr. Hermouche and the geriatric ward at Lagneto Medical Center a groundbreaking clinical trial in order to examine the effect of dement leaf oil with high concentrations of CBD in reducing agitation compared to placebo.
למעשה הרעיון למחקר היה לחפש אופציה טיפולית אחרת, אופציה שהיא לא טיפול פסיכיאטרי, והלכנו למעשה על שמן קנאביס, שמן עתיר CBD, מחקר שהוא כפול סמיות, מבוקר פלצבו. מטופלים במחקר חולקו לשניים. חלק קיבלו שמן זית וחלק קיבלו שמן עתיר CBD.
At the beginning of the study, the 2 groups had identical levels of behavioral disorder. Tests were conducted every 2 weeks over the 16-week treatment period. The study results showed that treatment with dement leaf is safe and significantly reduces agitation and aggression.
אני ממש מקווה שיש כאן מקום לתקווה, לטיפול חדש לחולי הדמנציה.
Tikun Olam Cannbit. Join us.
The elderly population who are suffering from disorder behavior in dementia, and as of today, we're used to be hospitalized, a different kind of method to be treated at home, and I do believe that it is a huge advantage, and it is the promise for our parents, etc. So this is the idea of it.
Avinoam, I would like you to add a little bit, if you can, because we know that it was published, that you have a lot of collaboration in this area with Wavelength and with Teva. And this is, in a way, quite unique because we don't hear a lot of pharmaceutical companies, being involved in the cannabis area. So if you can shortly just tell us a little bit about those collaborations.
Yes, sure. So first of all, 3 different points. First of all, it's not only Teva and Wavelength. In every one of the countries that we are collaborating with, getting into the country, we are getting in through a pharmaceutical company. Wow. Always. And the reason for that, we are a pharmaceutical company. It's true that it's coming from the cannabis, but we see ourselves as a pharmaceutical company, and we do believe that the one that know how to market rightly to the physician, to the key opinion leader, will know how to convey the right messages of our clinical trial. And we are unique in the clinical trial, and this is the reason why we are unique in the way of marketing. It's not a marketing for the parties. It's not marketing because the flower is purple. We are marketing because we know what there exists in the flower. So this is one thing. So it's not only them. Regarding this collaboration, the idea is getting into the backbone of the global pharmaceutical industry. Wavelengths, as you may know, it is a global API, active pharmaceuticals ingredient suppliers, focused in the regular synthetic chemical drugs that decided to get into the cannabinoid space, and after due diligence decided to do it with us. So we are doing a purification phase together in order to have the ability to submit the product as a compound for the pharmaceutical industry or the FDA, whatever it is. So this is one thing with the wavelengths. So purification, it's after the distillation, there's the flower, then there is the oil, then there is the distra and the distillate, and then you got the purification. So we are getting into more than 99% of purification of the specific compound. So this one thing with the wavelengths. With Teva, after the idea that I left Teva, Yoram, you left Teva as well, but Teva understood that there is an opportunity in that space, specifically in the countries where they got a leadership position in the OTC, which is a complementary offering, and specifically in Israel, the headquarters of Teva is sitting in Israel, so decided to try to get into it again in a gentle mood. And in that case, they conducted a due diligence and decided to continue the collaboration specifically with us about a specific dossier or specific strains. Actually, they choose 2 strains, and these strains are getting to the consumer or to the patient, and not through smoking because it's a global pharmaceutical company, but in other administration forms, and the decision was to go together with us. So we choose the right strains that we already got the clinical data upon, and we are actually developing the product, and hopefully by the end of the summer, the patient in Israel will have the opportunity to get the product from Teva, and Teva in Israel, it's a brand, a strong brand, actually the strongest brand, but this is a product that is cultivated in our facility, it was manufactured in our facility, and it is based on our knowledge and experience in the last 15 years.
So Avinoam, you're telling us that you, together with other companies, right, you have a lot of collaboration. So now it's a tricky question. How can companies can actually put, I don't want to call it pressure, so how can cannabis companies apply pressure to governments that hesitate in order to, to legalize cannabis, both medical and adult use? So I just don't want to concentrate just on the, recreation, because we see many countries, especially in Europe, that are not in the medical yet as well. So what is the secret? How can you and the companies you are collaborating with, put more pressure over there?
So I think that there are pressures that are coming from a different angles, which means that, first of all, there is the pressure that will come and is coming from the finance part. Countries are struggling with the budget that related to treatment of people, of their people. And I do believe that with the right methods, the cannabis can relieve in some of this indication in a different, absolutely different kind of money that's associated with. For the sake of the example, we spoke previously about the dementia. All of these people were used to be hospitalized. The meaning of taking them back to their community, back to their home, it's a huge budget that associated with. But in order to regulate to do that, they have to have the comfort that they are not actually, or the trust, that they are not putting any risk for their people. In order to do that, you have to have the right clinical or evidence-based data. And we are an example for a company that invested a lot, like millions of dollars, in order to convince them to create this kind of clinical data. But of course, this kind of clinical data is the one that creates the trust that is needed. The third thing is related that, as I said previously, most of the world, first of all, is looking north to the US. What's happening in the US? We saw the movement that in the northern part of America, Canada and US, and I do believe that more and more countries are going to follow up. And lastly, know that once they saw that although that people got the adult use opportunity, actually the result that associated with that, the number of the violence, the car accidents, etc., is in reduced. Then it's give the trust and the relief not only to the medical part, but also the other authorities as well. My last comment is related to the UN. When they said about the cannabis, which is not really a risky thing, and they think about the money, effort, people, hours that invested in the last 100 of years in order to try to catch the people who had used to smoke cannabis, it's ridiculous. So exactly as happened in the US like 100 years ago, when they actually stopped the dry time or whatever it was.
The alcohol, yeah.
Yes, for the alcohol. So I do believe that it's will happen the same case with the cannabis. And about the cannabis, there are people that are confused that are actually compared to alcohol. I do believe and I do want to actually compare it to the wellness, because again, it can create many different benefits related to the body. And I think that along days, we're going to see more and more evidence that coming for it. And this is the one that creates this kind of pressure.
And I think you also believe that the consumers or the patients themselves have also a part to play in putting pressures on governments.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just being from the US, we are constantly still fighting this war on drugs battle where cannabis was vilified for so long. My parents were the baby boomers, and they just recently started being open to the idea of cannabis for wellness purposes, and also for some medical purposes too, like sleeping and things like that. So I'm excited that we're moving away from it, but we've, at least here in the US, we've got a long way to go. So, it's my understanding that since 2014, Israel Defense Force members in reserve status have been authorized to use medical cannabis. Some soldiers have received prescriptions for cannabis to treat PTSD. We also spoke about that a little bit earlier. And this is with the authorization and support of the Health Ministry and the Ministry of Defense. In your opinion, and as someone who has served in the Israeli army, does this model work? Is this something that would be beneficial to the US, which has the world's biggest military and a very high rate of veteran suicide, by the way? And what do you think is the most effective way to see this change come to the US?
So if I would have to summarize my answer in a really short thing, the answer is absolutely yes. So there is no question that is beneficial. The number of the people who are working in Tikun Olam, as of today, Tikun Olam Cannbit, who has PTSD, it's dozens. And I do believe that the reason for that, they are connected to the flower, they understand the benefit of it, they actually have a better life with using that one comparable to all the other anti-anxiety kind of drugs, chemical drugs. And the people who are suffering from it understand what can be the benefits related to this one. So I do believe that if, and here is the tricky thing, if you are using the right strains or the right method, and if you are using the specific methodology in order to get into the right level of consumption of cannabis, then you can be a really a good citizen, a work-life balance in a correct way, and still not really, and relieving all the side effects that related to the PTSD. Unfortunately, we got too many soldiers that are suffering from PTSD, and we already understand what would be the right method of consumption. So it's a specific strain for different, along the day, at different hours in the day, or the way that it is actually increasing the administration. Or another thing is to find the right balance. So if you ask me if it can be a solution for the veterans in the US? The answer is yes. And by the way, our global head of research, R&D, actually presented in the US in one of the conventions over there related to PTSD. So I do believe that our research that is related to PTSD, and we got a huge research about this one, shown in a specific numbers what can be the effect of it, but you have to do it in the right strains and in the right methodology.
Got it. Can you talk a little bit about which strain is helpful for PTSD?
So the answer is again yes, but I think that it's a bit tricky since for the day use it's a bit different than for the night use. Mm-hmm. So I would say that we are combining 3 different strains in that administration. It's called 3 of them called Erez, Alaska, and Avidekel. And each one of them, it's for different hours or different forms. There are people that are suffering in a different way in the nighttime. So I think that we are trying to give them a different kind of indica so they can sleep better. And in order them to be useful on the day use, so they're having a different kind of strengths, but it's a combination of these 3, Erez, Alaska, and Avidekel. And again, if and I can share, maybe you can share, or the people who would like to get more information about this one, they can get into the website of Tikun Olam and to see some of the results related to the PTSD that showing the exact improvement in the quality of life and some other effects of it.
Wow, thank you.
Avinoam, most cannabis use started actually by consuming the plant itself. Now Tikun Olam is leading that, and we see more and more cannabis-based pharmaceuticals. We call it medical cannabis, but it's pharmaceuticals, it's medicines. So what do you think, which ways Tikun Olam that already find the way to medicate with precision, as you described, with specific illnesses, with specific medicines, which do you think the market is the more likely to respond to favorably as global legalization unfold? In other words, where do you think the potential, and also if you can relate to that, is Israel playing a role here in being like the test field for those pharmaceuticals? So how do you see that taking it globally?
So first of all, I think it's a great question, Yoram, and the reason for that, I think that as of today, there is only one company globally that really did it, which is GW, that actually created the Pidiolex that sold that the company itself sold more than $7 billion, but the product itself is selling about $500 million on a yearly basis. And it's amazing that there is one company that succeeds doing the full process in order to get the FDA approval, which creates a lot. Having said that, the Pidiolex conducted 5 clinical trials that shows, in average, a reduction of the seizures, of epileptic seizures, about 42%, more than 50% of the seizures. On the same time, clinical trial is being conducted in the Israeli hospital, Sheba Israeli hospital, that show that using a full spectrum of one of our strains, the efficacy of the treatment was 20% more. So the idea that we understand that using a full spectrum,
which is not just CBD, it's GW, GW is CBD.
Compared to GW, I'm speaking right now. And again, using a full spectrum can create a better results. But there is not even one regulator that will approve in the future a registration of a drug for a full spectrum. I don't think that it will happen, never. Although it's more potent, but there will never be registered as a drug, unless it's going to be cultivated in a different way, which means like in a biological strain, I would say, like biological drugs that are coming with a bioreactor. It might be the same case more or less. Or the different way, if it's not going to be a full spectrum, it's going to be the administration form. Let's take, for example, like inhaler. Again, for, patch, where you can show the adherence, the consistency, the compliance with the same kind of method, with the same kind of composition, then it might happen. So I do believe that there are two options going forward, I would say, for a real pharmaceuticals in one or another, or cultivate it not as a flower, but in a different method like bioreactors, or having it in a different administration form. So this is at least my vision going forward.
Avinoam, I wanted to ask you again, we are jumping from the scientific side to the business side. So I want to take you back to the business side of it. And what do you think? I mean, at the end of the day, Tikun Olam, Cannbit, and others are commercial companies, right? Mm-hmm. So I want to ask you a little bit about revenues. How do you see the difference between, the medical side or the pharmaceutical side of cannabis products versus the adult use, or even if we want to take it to the wellness side? But, what do you see the differences, if there are differences, from the revenue point?
So first of all, we have to look to the truth in the eyes and to see that as of today, even the huge companies that are focused in adult use, that created a huge revenue, are not really profitable. Most of them, I would say, the biggest one, I would say, are not profitable. And even if they are going to be profitable again, it's kind of more or less as a fast-moving consumer goods, where the percentage of the profitability is pretty low. While saying that one, still GW, again, is the one that actually succeed to register, to do the full-blown of registration of a pharmaceutical in the FDA, that really succeed to show the revenue in one hand and the profitability other hand. And the reason for that is once there is an insurer that do believe that is ready to pay, then it's a different ballgame. So I do believe that in a quick win, I do believe that the adult use is easier and it's closer, and it might happen even faster. But the one that really has the potential to be 20x, 30x, 100x is the one that are really related to the medical part. If you can show from the pharmacoeconomic side that you're going to be more potent, less side effects, and out-of-pocket money, which is going to be much less than that, then I do believe that the potential is there. So if I'm a company that's looking for a short term, the adult use is going to be the solution. If I'm a company that are ready to invest, then the one that has the real potential, from my personal perspective, is the one that's going for the medical full-blown, or registration in the health authorities or the administration forms.
And you also see the health insurance companies coming in. We know in Germany is it part, in Israel it's not exist, but do you see the health insurance companies accepting cannabis-based pharmaceuticals?
So last week, there was a decision in the Supreme Court in Israel that although the Ministry of Health is not really acknowledge the cannabis as the pharmaceuticals, still the insurance company have to cover the payment for the pharmaceutical, it was a flower. Having said that, I think that in the end of the day, the regulator will not have any kind of choose, and they have to pay for it, because again, it's a relief for the sleep, it's a relief for the concholitis, it's a relief for some other stuff. So I do believe that it will come. Again, it's a matter of time and a matter of ability to prove the efficacy of it.
So the next question I had for you, I think we really covered a lot of it, but it was, how does the quality of cannabis produced in Israel compare to cannabis grown in other parts of the world? Do you have any more information that you could share with us?
So I would say two things about this one. First of all, in our manufacturing site, we have a lab, a huge lab that is for the R&D and for the commercial purposes as well. And our manufacturing site is not manufactured only for Tikun Olam, but is also supporting another 16 different companies, among them public companies that are marketing their product in Israel. And if I'm looking for the cannabinoid space, not only the THC, then I was amazed to see the results. So So products that might coming into Israel has a huge level of THC, but from all the other mannose cannabinoids, they are really almost nothing. So you saw in the CBG, CBN, CBDV, CBG, all the other stuff, they are almost zero, and THC very high, which is easier to sell for the purpose of the people that are not really understanding the flowers of today, and they are really going into the THC. As of today, the product defined in Israel by two parameters, which is THC and CBD, as I always saying, it's like describing person by his eyes and his ears. But what about his teeth and his hair and his personality and his weight and his smile and all the other stuff as well? So only looking from a different or a comprehensive perspective of the product itself, you can analyze it properly. And if I'm looking from these comprehensive analytical purposes, then I can tell you for sure that are strains in Israel that are richest, very rich in a different cannabinoids, and actually have a specific composition that can create, that already proved that create the benefit not only for the patient, but also for the adult use purposes. So I had the opportunity to be in California lately, and we haven't met there, but I saw a flower which is 32% of THC. I said, wow, amazing. We don't have these kind of flowers in Israel. By the way, in Israel, you can actually market only products that are less than 24.5.
I did not know that.
This is the maximum THC that is allowed. So I smoked the flower.
Oh, you did?
Yes, of course.
How was it?
It's legal in California, right?
Yes.
Legal. And I can tell you that the feeling that I had, if I would put these specific flowers in and I will do a kind of a test, which is how it's called blind test. I can tell you that most of the people that we used it can tell you that it is the feeling effect was different than the one that we are feeling in some of the strains that exist in Israel. So, and I saw flowers that are coming from Canada to Israel, which look great. Seriously, looks great. Much better than the strains that I saw in Israel. But the feeling effect of it, or the long-lasting feeling of it, so it's not only for a few minutes or body, but even a week after and 2 weeks after continue to use the same kind of strain, it's not always the same kind of feeling. So I think that if you ask about my personal opinion about the different cannabinoid flower that exists or different riches that exist in our flowers, there is a differences a bit. Again, the number of the cannabinoids. And by the way, this is the reason why we personally, Cannbit, Tikun Olam Cannbit, export our strains to Africa by Cannbilog. Yes, they are the one that did it. But the idea that we actually export the strains, even not only the strains, but the genetic itself, because if we would like to compete in some other markets, the cost of cultivation in Israel is higher, but the flowers itself, it's amazing. So personally, I'm not sure that I'm so neutral, frankly speaking, but it is my understanding about the difference in the composition. I think that we have something to offer which is unique.
I would like to ask you, Avinoam, a question which is very dear to my heart. In the past, you managed Eshel, which is the largest distribution pharmaceutical company here in Israel, largest by far. And I'm managing now a logistic company in the area of cannabis. And given the fact that the regulations are so different between different countries, even within Europe, different countries, different regulations, it's very complex to move cannabis globally. And so just wonder, how do you see the challenges when it comes to international logistics of cannabis? What do you see there from your own experience?
Since it is a heavy regulated market, and doing import and export by itself, it's a complicated thing, but putting it as a drug, it's becoming much more difficult. Lately, and when I'm saying lately, it's last Friday, Cannbilog did an export from Israel to Europe, right? Again, of the genetic, not for the dosage by itself. And even that, we were prepared previously like 2 weeks. In the end of the day, we found ourselves struggling with the paper thing that getting into that country in Europe. So I do believe that you have to work very closely with a very professional company like you guys, Yoram, in order to mitigate all the risks that associated with export and import of this specific drug, which is create the kind of suspicious around all the regulators around the world, and this is a very heavy regulated industry. So I do believe that in order to mitigate the risk and actually to have the opportunity to import or to export properly, you have to work with a very dedicated and specific companies that are focused specifically on cannabis, and I think that specifically Yoram, you're a great example of it.
Thank you very much.
As we start winding down here, I'm going to end my line of questioning with kind of a fun little question. And it's totally optional, but I would like to know, Avinoam, what is your favorite Tikun Olam Cannbit strain and why?
So first of all, I got a license in Israel. So I'm smoking by law.
Yes.
Or actually consumption by law, not only by smoking, but consumption by law. And there is one strain, which is a sativa strain, that although that I'm using it more than 2 years, every time that I'm using it, the feeling is the same. And this is the idea that I wanted to say previously. So the idea that you are getting in of the day, as long as and actually we are the only one that follow up about 13 different cannabinoids and the composition of it in the flower in the last 6 years. So every batch, we know exactly what are the 13 cannabinoids look like and what is the composition, whether it is in the right method that we wanted to have it. So Alaska, which is a sativa, it is the favorite one for my personal perspective, and the idea that we are getting the same kind of feeling, and it's always fun. So this is it for me.
I love it. Thank you for sharing.
Ivy, you have to try it. Otherwise, you are not really understand what I'm talking about. And although that I'm smiling, it's not related to that one.
I'm coming to Israel.
Please,
welcome. I will try that strain. Legally.
The Cannbit, the Tikun products that you have in the US are produced in the US, I believe, right?
Yeah, sure. By law, you cannot really import into the
that's
US today. So,
in a specific state or?
So there are several states that Tikuns exist, by the way, in Europe as well, and it's under the brand of Tikun and not Tikun Olam.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we have a location kind of close to me in Adelanto, California. Is that correct?
Sorry, again, you got?
I believe we have a location kind of close to me. It's in Adelanto, California.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Right,
okay.
right. You're right.
Awesome. And I can go online and I can see what they're producing, and then I can see where it's being sold, and I can go get it, right?
Right.
And can I get the Alaskan strain that you're talking about?
I believe so. Yes.
Excellent.
The answer is yes.
Well, then I have some work to do.
Yes, you are. By the way, I didn't try lately the Alaska from the US. It's the same strain, but I do believe that that the feeling is the same. But at least I still welcome you here in Israel to try it in our own facility.
I would love to. That would be a dream come true. Absolutely. Right. Well, I believe that is the end of our interview today and our discussion. Avinoam Sapir, thank you so much for coming on and having a wonderful discussion with us. Yoram, thank you so much for co-hosting with me. It's been absolutely wonderful. And thank you to all of our listeners for watching our video cast. We will link to all the resources that we've mentioned below in the comment section of our YouTube video when we post it. Okay? Thank you so much again.
Thank you for the opportunity, being part of it, and wishing you all the best.
Thank you very much, Ivy. It was a pleasure having you. Avinoam, thank you very much. It was Much pleasure having you, and good luck to all of us.
Thank you so much. We will see you all at our next Going Global videocast.
Thank you very much.